Kyle Goon joins us, Southern California News Group, covering the Lakers and an NBA writer. Kyle, thanks for joining us. Is everything good with the Lakers now after polishing off the Blazers?
Uh, that's a complicated question, Dan. I would say the tone of Saturday was a lot happier and healthier than perhaps it was earlier in the week. Obviously, Wednesday night, there was a thought that perhaps the Lakers would be one of the foundational teams in actually sitting out the rest of the games of the season. But on Saturday night, they closed at the Blazers. It took them a couple extra days, but they took care of business. Now they have a couple days off. Some families are supposed to arrive today, and that's a really big moment that a lot of players on a veteran team have been looking forward to. So I would say they're doing a lot better, but obviously there's been a lot of shaking up in the last week.
Well, I'm looking at the latest column from you, and granted, you don't write the headline, but it says after a trying week and a Lakers series win, LeBron James pulls back from the brink.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to really understand that. LeBron tried to tell us the other day that he was not upset. I think that he was. I think that he was frustrated on Wednesday night when he realized that Milwaukee had staged a protest that they kind of thought was going to be one game, one forfeit, a very sort of organic moment, not really communicating with the rest of the league. But obviously, there's a lot of tension among, athletes for sure, who are some of the most prominent and resourceful people of color in the whole country. And it struck a nerve, I think, that the Bucks did not realize that it would. And then once players were meeting later that night, when LeBron, who definitely understands the power and ramifications of a move like that, got got to that meeting, he realized there was nothing that Milwaukee was prepared to ask for to resume play. They just thought, hey, we're gonna go out for Game 6 and try to win our series then. So I think that was the frustration. I don't know how close he was to actually walking out. I don't think he had his bags packed or anything, but I think there was a lot of thought given to the fact that, if we aren't asking for something, what are we doing here?
Well, you have more concerns about the Lakers on the floor or off the floor?
I think off for sure. And another thing LeBron said that night, and partly in jest but partly not, is that he's given a thought to leaving the bubble every day. And it's such a weird situation here, Dan, because I understand what he means. I mean, another there's just not a lot of outlets. There's not a lot of changing routine. You have isolation from the people you love, and I think there's something really profound about just the when something happens in the outside world, like the Jacob Blake shooting, and obviously a lot of players care. It really makes the feeling of helplessness and frustration more pronounced. And I honestly think that the bubble has a lot to do with the Bucks' decision to try and forfeit that game on
We've got a
Wednesday.
long way to go, though. The Bucks do, and the Lakers. These are, the two favorites here.
Yeah, yeah, and we've already done 50 some days, and we got 40 some days to go. I'm also here the entire way. So it's definitely it can feel like a long look up to the top of the mountain, I think. So I think for some guys, I mean, obviously George Hill said even before that we shouldn't even come to this place. I'm being polite language for your listeners, but guys were feeling it, and I think that's um, inextricable from what actually happened. That guys were feeling frustrated. Guys were feeling like, we're putting these messages out there. We have these messages on the back of our jerseys. We have the messages on the court, and what is it really making a difference? Is it really being heard? Is there more we could do if we were outside? And I think that's something that you really feel here as long as we've been here when you're in isolation.
Watching the Clippers against the Mavs, everybody was in on Portland upsetting the Lakers, and I said, Dallas has a better chance of upsetting the Clippers. And if the Clippers, if it had been reversed and the Lakers played the Mavs, then everybody would have said, oh, the Mavs can upset the Lakers. Because you get clicks when you talk about the Lakers. Nobody was thinking, hey, let me write about the Clippers maybe getting upset. I thought that they were perilously close to being down 3-1, and I mean, eventually we see the real Kawhi Leonard stepping up. I just don't know if who is going to be the guy you count on to step up with Kawhi. Because as great as he is, one guy's not winning this title with that team. So
Yeah.
have you, like, you look at the Clippers and the Lakers, who would be your favorite between those two playing for a championship?
That is a really good question. And, this entire playoffs has been, I mean, I think the mental edge is such an X factor because I think the thing happening with the Lakers in the Blazers series is one thing that really needed to happen for them is Anthony Davis needed to believe, you know what, like I don't really have a matchup on this team. And I think that's going to be a constant battle for the Lakers in the same way. Obviously, Paul George between the two quote unquote co-stars is having a rougher time and has admitted to having a rougher time. And I don't want to diminish from that because it is very relatable, to be honest. When he said those things, it's very relatable as somebody who's been living here for about the same amount of time. But
You felt
yeah,
those
I
same
agree.
things, Kyle?
I mean, not checking out because we remain busy, but just a desire to like just change something about your circumstances. Same room, same small area you go around. When I run in a circle around the Coronado Springs Resort. So I think there's this sort of the days can kind of blend together, and guys, I mean, the guys have said this. So it's just this X factor that it's really hard to anticipate. And I think Paul George has struggled with that. I think one reason Kawhi has not, he told us last night when he had that injury with San Antonio and he was rehabbing by himself, he's like, all right, like all I did was kind of gym, go home. And he did that for what, a year? And he sort of has had that reclusive experience away from some others and knows how to go through it. So I think that's why you've seen he's been remarkably consistent. And he really is. I mean, if you watch him in that series, as great as and spellbinding as Luka was, Kawhi was unguardable, and he was hitting shots that you're sort of like, well, this isn't really a great shot, but for Kawhi, he'll kill you in the mid range because you'll just let him sit and he'll just pick you apart. So I think that's a great base. And if Paul George can kind of figure out some consistency, and maybe that'll get easier as we're sort of rolling downhill here. I would pick the Clippers and like over the Lakers right now in a pick 'em, but like I said and like you said, it's really hard to know mentally where some of the guys are going to be at.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. I appreciate you sharing your personal feelings on that because it's kind of like, you're in the bubble too. We talk about these athletes, but you're in a bubble too, so you can certainly understand that. Before I let you go, Jamal Murray averaged 18 points a game, I think, this year. He's putting up 50 every night. What has changed with Jamal Murray in the bubble?
That is an interesting question too, because I think for certain guys they're just shooting lights out, and I also look at his counterpart in that series, Donovan Mitchell, who I covered for a year, and I really enjoy watching play. But I mean, he put up 250 pieces too. It's kind of unbelievable what's happening in that series, and really, I mean, pleased that it gets to go to 7 games. But I think there are guys here who they really just do dive in on that investment to basketball. I mean, Jamal Murray has been capable of doing those kinds of games, just not usually back to back to back.
Yeah.
But I think there is something about this, and where guys can seize on the emotion of the moment, can seize on the, hey, we don't want to go home yet, even though maybe you do want to go home in some respects. But it's been really cool to watch. I mean, Dame before them in the seeding games, all the way to make a run. And there's been some guys who really have found a way to thrive in this environment and add it sort of to the it's us against the adversity of the world mindset that you were talking about with Big John before the break. So it's been really interesting and fun and sometimes really rewarding to watch.
Good luck there, Kyle, and we appreciate you joining us.
Thank you for having me, Dan.
That's Kyle Goon. He covers the Lakers for Southern California News Group, NBA writer.